We are live. Hello, ladies and gentlemen out there on the interwebs. My name is James Murua, and welcome to the James Murua Literary LiveStream. Yes, it's a very original name. Today we're talking about poetry in Germany and DR Congo. My guests are Anja Saleh. Is it Anja or it's Anja, right?
It's Anja, yeah.
Perfect. It's Anja Saleh, and it's from Germany. Where are you right now?
I am in Berlin.
Berlin. And our other guest is Nsoseme Dora, and she's in Kinshasa. I don't know if you can hear me, though. I think we'll chat with her in a minute. We're having a bit of problem connecting, but welcome, Do, and welcome, Anya. Let me just introduce these ladies who are in the session. Anya is a political advisor, artist, poet, and author of Soon, The Future of Memory, her first full length poetry collection, published in June 2021 with Edition Assemblage in Germany. And Do is a Congolese poet, spoken word artist, photographer, and actress who lives and works in Kinshasa. She holds a bachelor's degree in visual communication from the Academy of Fine Arts of Kinshasa, which was preceded by a high school diploma in Latin Philo. Welcome, ladies.
Hello, thank you so much for having us.
Excellent. Joe will come back later. I see that there's an issue with our connection. So maybe we can just start with you, Anya. How you doing? I last saw you in Berlin, I believe.
Yeah, it's been a while. It's been a few years actually. It was a pre-pandemic literature event, I remember. But I've been
Mhm.
fine. I've been fine. Thank you so much. How have you been?
No, I've been great. I've been great. As you can see, I'm in partnership with a Frankfurter bookmesser, and I'm
Yes.
just trying to do my thing and trying to bring the people into the knowledge of what's happening in their world. Hi, Do. Are you able to connect to us? Hello. Okay, so that is Joe. We'll try and figure out what to do. Maybe we can start with you, Anya. Would you like to tell us about how you got into this poetry thing? What made you get into it?
Apologies, there's a noise coming.
Oh my God.
I'm not sure. I didn't really get your question.
Let me ask you again.
Yes.
Um, what happened? How did you get into the poetry game? What made you get into poetry in the first place?
Wonderful question. I think writing was one of the most accessible things for me, coming from a working class family, single mom who raised me and my sister, not much money for instruments or classes of any sorts, right? So writing and reading were the most accessible things. My mom worked in the library when I was younger and still does actually. And this was one of the things that gave me great access to all kinds of books, of course, and also really like manifested an interest in books for me. So this is how I got to reading, and as a consequence, also writing. Yeah, I think this is how it started. How exactly I got into poetry is a very good question. I think poetry answered some of my questions about who gets to decide what grammar, structure, or usage of language is. And that is something I love to work with and decided to work with.
No, that's very good. If you're wondering what's happening, I'm trying to connect Do into the session. Um, Though we're having a really horrible feedback, let me try and connect you again. We can see you, but okay. Can you say hello? Hi, Joe. How you doing? Okay, this is Okay, we'll just try to go with Joe again in a few minutes, in a minute or so. You said you just started when you were a much younger person, from the library dealing with your parent. And so how do you go from being a library user? Ah, Joe, can you hear us clearly now? We can see you. Hello. Okay, she's taken off a bit later. So how do you go from being how do you go from somebody who is enjoying and writing poetry and reading books to being having a full collection of poetry that just came out this year?
I want to say it's luck, but what is luck? Um, I think that places like, or events and people who supported poetry, who invited me to places, who made sure I get the exposure that at the end led to this book are the reason for that. So again, community, honestly. It's not something that I've just done by myself. It's literally people believing in me, community that prioritized people they haven't heard of yet, or they actually weren't sure about, but just gave them a shot, basically. That's also how I met with Sharon, who at the end asked me to be part of her book series, Witnessed. Yeah. And also a firm belief of like me wanting to archive my experiences and that of many who came before me, who influenced me in a way that doesn't necessarily die with me when I die.
So who are these people who influenced you? Who are the influences in the poetry? Is it just poetry, even prose? Who are these influences that made you that now are influencing the work you're doing?
To stay within Germany, I think one of the first people who just addressed me out of the blue, and it really surprised me because it was a person I really look up to, event organizer, artist, dancer, writer, Jumoke Adeonjo. And basically, Jumi just texted me and asked me on stage, and I have never identified as a spoken word artist or slam poet, so I wrote poetry to be read and not to be necessarily listened to. But she has opened to me this possibility of performative reading, and I think that was back in 2015 or 2016. And that's when I first had enough courage to actually go up on stage and read one of my poems. And she brought me back on stage years later and made me engage with people and literary scene that I haven't known of before or known of its existence before in Germany.
Hello, Joe. Can you hear us? Can you see us now?
I can hear you and see you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Great. Finally,
Welcome,
it's working.
welcome.
Thank you. I'm great to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us on the live stream today. I know we've had a bit of connection issues for the last few minutes, but I'm really excited to have you here. First of all, I've just introduced the people. You told them you're, photographer, actress, poet. Would you tell us a little bit about yourself, some of the work you've done in the poetry space?
Yes. So my name is Do, as you all heard, and can you hear me perfectly?
Yes.
Yeah, great. So I was saying that my name is Do, and I'm a slam poet. I'm a photographer. I'm an actress. I'm a poet also, and I've been working writing poems since my childhood. But I actually get into that professionally after a contest that I did in 2015. I won a prize as the first slam poet in Kinshasa, It was a contest organized by the French Institute, and that leads me to actually get into poetry more. And I have performed in a show called The Slam Our World in Belgium. That was a great show in 2017. And what else can I say? I love to write poems.
I'm really happy to hear this. What I'm going to ask you immediately now, because you said that you were the first slam poet in a competition in 2015. Would you like to tell us a little bit about what the poetry scene in Congo? I'm assuming Kinshasa is what you want to talk about, because Congo is a big country. Would you like to
Yes,
tell us
Congo
a
is a
little bit
big
about?
country. Congo is a big country. I can't really tell you a lot about the whole Congo, but since I'm in Kinshasa, so the scene is very, it's a great scene. There are a lot of poets, and most of the poets don't just write books, don't just write poems to publish books, but what they do actually is that they perform on scene as slam poets. And there are a lot of associations of poets, because poetry is not really something that people read in Congo. Um, there are a lot of poets, there are a lot of people writing poems or writing books, but Congolese are not likely to buy books, but they mostly prefer to listen to music. So the poets are organizing themselves to conquer new public. So they do that by organizing shows and performing at schools, or even organizing workshops in schools, in universities.
It sounds really, really exciting. So when you're saying that they're trying to do live events so that people can listen to
Yes.
the poetry, so what are the kind of things that they're poeting about? What are the stories they're talking about? What are the most pressing issues that they like talking about in the live events?
So they talk about the country mostly, what is happening in the country. I feel like the poets in Congo, in Kinshasa especially, are like the witness of what is happening, are like the storytellers, the actual storytellers, kind of griots telling the story of what was before and what is happening today. So they express most of the time their hopes, their despairs also, because in Eastern Congo there is wars. Uh, there are a lot of things happening. So in the poems, we really feel that. But there is also always a presence of the river in most of the poems. You know, the Congo is in the Congo we have this river, the Congo River, and many poets, when they write their poems, there are allusions to the river. I don't know how to say that, but it feels like the river is kind of the source of the poems. There is a spatial a spatial relationship to the river.
Okay. And I think I'll move to Anya a bit here, so that what are the German poets that because you mentioned that there's a bit of also live. So what are they talking about in their poetry?
I mean, there's an abundance of poems by
I don't know,
poets.
Anya. I really hate to. I don't know what's happening. There's a horrible background. There's a sound we are hearing. Can you hear it though? It's a
Yes, I can hear that there is some, when Anja speaks, there is some background sounds.
yes. I don't know what's happening. There
So
it
it's
is.
there.
Yes.
I hear it from your speaker, but I don't hear it here myself.
It could be the earphones, maybe.
Maybe you remove the earphones for a minute. We see how it sounds without the earphones.
Is it still there?
No, it's gone.
Interesting. All right. So there's an abundance of poets in Germany, right? And then thinking of Afro-diasporic, Afro-German, or poets of African descent, the topics usually somehow include some sort of they revolve around, of course, identity, or to be torn about the countries that they or we, I'm including myself in this now because I'm not completely, like, I don't write about something completely different, right? I think we ask the question a bit differently, but many write about our experience here, which sometimes is very different, sometimes has intersections. There's a lot about the negative experiences here that we are processing in our work, but then also there's so much hopeful and beautiful and love-filled visionary work that talks about the future and our hopes and all the good things that just come with being ourselves and being us, even though the political climate here doesn't necessarily support this being us in full and always needs us reshaped and reformed and in some different way, right? But I think I'm observing more of a change of topics in recent years, maybe even just months, where people are wondering about, okay, what would I write about if racism wouldn't exist? What would I, or if I wouldn't been in a racist or grown up in a racist context or live in a racist context? And people are moving towards that direction more and more, which I really appreciate. But then again, it's a big part of our lives. And yeah, so I see that a lot, and identity, of course.
Okay, identity, the challenges of being Black in Germany, and that kind of thing. You actually have a, okay, you want to say something?
Yes.
Because yeah, continue.
You said the challenges. I wouldn't necessarily call it a challenge, right? Who's it a challenge for? Because for me, for example, I identify as African, Egyptian, German, but for me, there's no challenge. I think the challenge is for those who want to see a challenge in this, right? For me, it's something that enriches me, my surrounding, my writing, my being. I'm pretty sure that everyone who has several identities and several truths that go together, because these things do exist and coexist together, it's being made this exclusionary thing, this thing that needs to be a challenge or a crisis, but who decides that? Because I haven't really struggled with it, just because somebody decides they aren't okay with who I am, right? And I think this is also what I mentioned in the book many times. Like there's people who dislike who you are, but that doesn't make it your problem, right?
The book you're mentioning, how has it been received? How has it done?
It's surprisingly been received very well. To be very honest, I write in English. And I haven't witnessed or observed a big English-speaking poetry scene within Germany. So it's been really interesting actually seeing people who read the book in a German context, really giving quite good resonance to it. On my reading on Saturday, I've been asked what I would wish for my book. And to be honest, my first wish for the book is to actually be read outside of Germany, because I just feel like it will resonate so much more, even though it processes a lot of a German experience for somebody who is not a white German person. But yeah, surprisingly good. I'm very, very grateful for how it's been received so far. And yeah.
I just have to follow up on that. Whenever I'm hearing the Afro-German space right now, Sharon Dodua seems to be a huge name right now. What's the story? I mean, because maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I didn't know about her. And then suddenly it's a lot of things happening. Sharon seems to be a huge name. Would you like to talk to that a bit? What's the story?
Of course. I love Sharon. Sharon's not only a huge name for since 2 or 3 years, somebody who's been navigating also activist spaces or politically aware spaces and spaces that deal with topics around politics and the realities of Black and Afro-diasporic people within Germany. Sharon's name has been a name for way longer. Of course, I think in 2016 she won like a huge literary prize, which made her like name even more known in the literary scene. But Sharon is quite a key figure. Honestly, she started Witnessed with Edition Assemblage, which is like a small publishing house. And basically made sure to make room for English speaking or English writing authors in Germany, which is, I think, a first. I think she's the first to do this, which is interesting because we have like this really long history of African diasporas and African people being in Germany. And I don't know, just 6, 7, 8 years ago, Sharon was the first one to make sure there is actual official room for people with an African background who write in English in the literary scene. It's like these little game changers, right? That then surprise everyone. But it is a game changer. And it's quite sad that it's a small publishing house. And it's quite sad that just one person does so much besides her own like career, obviously, and family and activist work. So yeah, for everyone who does not know Sharon yet, please Google Sharon Dodwalto.
I've had her here, so I want to hear about her from somebody else than herself. Though I'm sure you've not heard of Sharon Dodwalto.
No,
I'm assuming you.
And I will
Okay,
Google
so
her.
you will Google her. Who are the Sharon Dodoas in your industry? I mean, I know there is a Young Writers Association based in Kinshasa. What are the people that we need to be checking out from Kinshasa who are doing the similar kind of things?
Well, I could say that Shinzo Hanza is the person that you'll be checking out. I don't know if you heard about him. So he's a writer, and but in his writing, there are some poetic way of writing is novels. He has published a novel and a theater as well. I think he's a must-watch person. And there are also some other young writers, poets, as Omega. He's not just in writing poems, he's also a slam poet, a very prolific one. He writes actually about the news. Like every week, he published and performed a slam poem about the news that's happening in Kinshasa like every week. And he has been doing that for like now 3 years. And I feel that this person also is a must-watch person.
Oh, wow, this seem really exciting. I noticed I've watched some of your poetry on your YouTube. There's a political poem, and your most recent one is Farm, which debuted recently.
Yes.
It's about like the woman.
Yes. Actually, in that poem, I'm talking about the path that women still have to embark into, because we have our rights now, women more rights than they used to have, but still there is a lot to do. And in that poem, what I wanted to say to all the women I know and all the women, not just in my country, but all over the world, is that you still have a path to take. You still have to work hard to have more rights, to have more presence, more opportunity to serve your country.
That is really, really exciting. I mean, I watched the poem. I don't speak French, but at least from the visuals. I've just posted I've actually just posted the link of that poem over there. And I just needed to see the visuals, and I'm like, okay, this woman is just bigging up the women in the world, and trying to tell us about the importance of why we need to be talking about them. This is something that's very important to you.
Yes, it's something very important to me. I think my poems are more of I write more about women rights and also about peace in Congo. So my poems are more focused on like to make a change or to encourage people to do something for a better world, you know.
I noticed that you have so many. I think somebody called it multi-hyphenated. You're a multi-hyphen person. You're a photographer, you're an actress, you're a. How does that influence the work, the poetry you're doing?
Sorry, I didn't get you well.
No, I'm saying that you have very many roles that you're doing. You're a photographer, you're an actress, you're a poet, you're all these things. How do they influence the poetry that you're producing?
Oh, all that I do influences my poetry a lot because in my other work, in other things that I do, I encounter many people. I have the opportunity to go in different places, and that is very interesting that I can actually, from all the places I am, when I meet people, it can inspire me to write something different and something about them. Also, I work as always find links to my poems and my photography or even my acting life. So sometimes I can perform a poem while I'm acting in a theater, or I can also when I exhibit my photos, I can also exhibit it with a poem, like put a sound like a share sound during the exhibitions of a poem related to the topics that I'm exploring in my photographies.
That's really good. What about you, Anja? I know that you're actually a political advisor, and you have an education in the political and social sciences. How does that influence what you're doing in the poetry?
To me, at the end of the day, all art is political, or the political cannot be divided from the personal, right? So what I write is a mixture of everything that I encounter. It could be a tree that I see, a person that I talk to, but also the political happenings in the country. So all that I do and all that I write is basically in constant exchange with each other. Nothing is isolated from the other.
Yeah, I just want us to go back to a discussion we had just before we went live. I was asking about the Afro-German scene because I really don't know many poets who are writing, who are producing work. Is it like there's no scene, or is it that it's German so we don't see it? Would you want to speak a bit about that?
There's both. There's many who write in German. And who perform more than they put out written texts, and everything somehow happens within, I would say, a community context, whatever community is, without digging deeper into definition of that. But there's Jumoke, who I talked about, who basically motivated me to actually go out there and perform my written texts. Has an event, Poetry Meets, and it's sometimes a poetry meets soul or poetry meets hip hop, which to me has moved mountains in Germany, to be very honest, right? Because the people who perform there, who we otherwise would never hear of or not know of, and the mixture of artists, musicians, and dancers, and writers, that for me is a space that actually gives room to these people. But Then also you have smaller publishing houses, like, for example, Edition Assemblage, who published my poetry collection and hosts the witness series of Sharon. But I think it's also, that's not your question, I know, but it's also a bit sad that it's only the smaller ones, right? Because it's never a big publishing house that hosts these rooms or these spaces for African diasporic writers or literature. And usually these small publishing houses are already drawing the attention of those who are interested in what we do or in what they do. But there's no one who actually tries to normalize our poetry, our work, which has been around for centuries. There's no big publishing house that the majority of people would just immediately trust, right? Who makes room for something that could otherwise quite quickly be normalized, because there's still a lot of exclusion happening, and there's still a lot of I don't want to say silencing, but almost erasure happening in the big literary scene. So someone like Sharon publishing with a big publishing house, her novel is a huge win for all of us at the end of the day. And back to, like, shortly back to what concerns Sharon, I think what makes her so special and so relevant and important is that whatever she does, it's not necessarily only about her. She understands that whatever she does is way bigger than just this one person. And we need more of that, but we also need more rooms that enable that.
Wow. I mean, I have to tell you, like, in my mind, I've always assumed that being Afro-German in Germany would open many doors to somebody. So what are some of the advantages of being in that space? Because I'm going to ask, like, what are some of the advantages of being in Kinshasa? But what are some of the advantages of being in a space like that? I know there's erasure, but probably there are things which we think are so great.
So I think a relevant information is that these spaces are usually always self-organized. And that takes a lot of work, because the people who are organizing these spaces usually do them without being paid for organizing these spaces, or not well paid. Then resources like time, space, and all the communications around these things. So credits to everyone who actually enables us to have room and spaces, but it should not be that way. Also, it's quite centered in Berlin, right? So I grew up in the south of Germany, where it was like very, very hard to find these kind of scenes, as you may call them, or any place to actually share poetry that is, one, written in English, but also centers like my existence as an African diasporic person in Germany. The advantages, I mean, it's the exchange, it's listening to other people, learning, unlearning together. It's so many things. I mean, at the end of the day, we're rich with so many influences, and the different backgrounds that we have, the different realities we live here, the different perspectives, the different disciplines, because most of us don't like just write, they write and are whatever they are, right? Some of them are academics and full-time artists, and others combine so many things with their writing, which also happens in exchange with their lived realities. So there's just such a big resource and an abundance of experiences and feelings and visions. It's all good at the end of the day. It is really all good.
What about you, though? How is the scene? You said you're doing events, but like, do you have like events like once a week, once a month? If I'm in Kinshasa and I want to enjoy some poetry, how do I experience it? Is it like a regular thing, or is it once every 3 months? What is the experience like that? What is experience?
So it's not at this time. It's not really a regular thing because of. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So I was saying that at this time it's not really a regular thing. There are not places where you can find poetry or a scene of poetry, of some poetry every week or every month, but there are events that are organized at least every 2 or 3 months. And what I really like with the scene here in Kinshasa is that so many things are possible. Like there is always something happening. Kinshasa is a big city, almost 15 million of people, and you can always find a way to do something. And also, you will never miss people who can come to see your performance. There are always people who wants to see things, who wants to hear things. And then since it's a big city and there are a lot of things happening, there are also a lot of influences that you can get, a lot of meetings that you can have also. And it's great that there are so talented people, not just in the poetry scene, but in other scene like painting or sculpture. So all these influences just gives you more to write about too. So, and what I can say is that it's really inspiring. There is always something happening in Kinshasa.
And that sounds really exciting. Ladies, if you have any questions for each other, please don't hesitate to jump in. Um, Anya, what is Datel Tata Academy? I see that it's something you've started. Do you want to tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, that's my workplace. So Datteltäter is a YouTube channel who explores and also depicts Muslim life, and I do this on purpose in Germany in a satirical way. And the academy is the nonprofit that basically the director of the channel has created in 2020. And the academy is a program, it's a fellowship program for 10 to 15 young artists per year. My colleague Mariam and I basically built a whole curriculum for young artists and host workshops during the year, retreats, and a final event, showcase event. Yeah, that's what Datteltäter Academy is about. Sorry?
How has it worked? Because you're just saying what it is. Do you already have graduates? Do you have excitement around the project?
Yes, as of the 16th of October, we have our first alumni class now because they had just finished the program and graduated from the academy, basically. It was interesting. I mean, we have Corona, right? So in 2020, when we were like writing the whole curriculum, we had actually planned some more offline events and ended up doing more workshops online than offline. But around the summer, July, August, we were lucky enough to be able to host our first like offline get together. And it's beautiful. It's basically, we're creating a space that we would have loved seeing when we were younger. It's for artists, BPOC artists in Germany. One is from Austria, but like in German-speaking countries, basically, who looking for community, but also support in their work, professional support and mentoring, because these are the things that we offered them, basically one-on-one mentoring and a series of workshops that supports them in their profession or craft.
You mentioned Corona, and maybe though you want to jump in here. I mean, how did the Corona affect the poetry people in Kinshasa? Is it still happening?
Actually, now it's not as it was in 2020, because in 2020, when Corona just hit the country, we couldn't perform anymore. Like everything was closed, not just the schools, but also cultural centers were closed. We couldn't organize events. We couldn't really meet, and we couldn't do our poetry. But what we did is that we went online. So we planned many events online. We did some slam poetry scene online. Um, Also, other shows where we could only invite kind of like 20 people because of corona measures. We had to showcase, we had to show that online. So, well, corona has also been an opportunity to open us more to the online world, like how we can not just do our poetry, to do live events in presence, in person, but how we can go online and still show our work and promote Congolese poetry.
How is Congolese poetry being received outside of Congo? I mean, does the fact that a lot of it is happening in French and Lingala, is it an issue if you're trying to promote it outside of Congo? Who are receiving the Congolese poetry? Because I know with the Congolese music is hugely popular across the continent. Is that the plan? I mean, just go with the same model, or just maybe speak to that.
I don't think that it's going into the same model. I don't think even there is a really plan for that. Like, so far, what I can say about about Congolese poetry is that people who are receiving it mostly are first the Congolese diaspora, and also people who heard about Congo, or who just hear about poetry, who loves poetry. Because what some of the difficulties that we have here in Congo is that the literary industry, the writer industry is not really organized. So, as I was saying, there are people, writers, who are trying to organize things, who are trying to promote their work, but it's not like as if we really had a plan. So it's
Mhm.
really challenging.
Okay. Do you have any questions for one another, Anya?
I think my question to Do is, because you asked like how Congolese poetry is perceived outside of Congo. Like, have you ever spent like longer times outside of Congo to actually be so far away from it to realize, oh, how it is actually perceived? That would interest me, because I find it always very hard, like, to be in a place and then know exactly how it is being perceived. Yeah, basically that.
Yeah, so I've never, I don't think I've been outside of Congo for a longer time to really feel that, to really know how it is feel. But I've been outside. I don't think that's enough to really sense that kind of feeling. But sometimes I can read from articles, from newspaper or newsletter about a certain poet, a certain Congolese poet, a certain Congolese like it's not really open to the whole world. It's more, it is still I feel to really hear about a Congolese poet, it has to go through a certain work that is not that open to the world.
Okay. Okay.
That's so interesting, because I think, though, you also have the privilege of like speaking and reading English and French and Lingala. So for you, you have so much more access to these things. So all I know about Kinshasa is that it has like a vibrant artist scene, right? Not necessarily specifically to poets and poetry, but in general, it's like, to me, in my world, it's known to have like a vibrant artist scene, like excellent artists. So it's really interesting to actually hear about the poetry part and the literature part. But it also does not surprise me that you are excelling in so many fields, because that's exactly what I like usually hear from artists in Kinshasa and the artist scene. That everyone does many things and they're just really good at it. But it's so interesting to also hear specifically about the poetry, because my French is very basic, so I don't necessarily have that access to the art scene or the poetry scene in Francophone countries as well. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you. Do if I want to know what's happening in the scene in Kinshasa, you said you go online. So what do people do? Like, is there like websites? Are there like YouTube channels? If I want to know what's happening in Kinshasa, how do I go about it if I'm not in Kinshasa and I don't have word of mouth?
Well, it depends on what you're looking. But if you're looking for poetry, then most of the time the event schedule on Facebook, it's not really in just one pages, but there is also a website called art.cd, art. I think I will tape that on the chat. It is art.cd, and in that website, seems like my chat is
Okay.
okay.
Just type it.
I will send it. I will send you the link. So there is a website called art.cd. In that site you can actually organize, but also another way of knowing what is organized, because it's through the network of the French Institute. They usually share what other artists organize.
Okay, French
I'm
Institute.
trying to tape that.
Okay, as you're typing in, Anja, would you like to tell us how and keep
also
follow
there is a YouTube channel from.
Sorry, would you repeat, James?
Yeah, as Dewey is trying to type in, would you tell us how we can follow your scene? Those of us who are not in Germany and we want to know what's happening in your scene, how would we keep up if we want to try and find out what's happening?
Great question. It's quite decentralized, but what makes sense is to follow the Poetry Meets Instagram page. I'm not sure if they have a website, to be honest. They do great things. Then I slam artists who host events and invite different artists, and especially with a focus on poetry, are definitely worth following. Eoto is worth following, where we actually met for the first time for the Afrolution Festival, because they host like a wide range of events, but also support many artists or have events around artists and art. Savvy Contemporary is a really great place to follow, and their work, it's an art space / gallery. They host a lot of talks, a lot of events, always great people to find there. There's an abundance of places. I'm probably forgetting the most important ones right now. Yeah. But whenever I remember something, I can definitely make sure to send it your way. I know about your website, obviously, and then maybe you can sneak it in somewhere for anyone who's interested in the German literary scene or poetry scene.
Thank you. I'll make sure I do like a wrap up of those websites. For those of you who tune in later, I'll do like a wrap up so you can have it, and it'll be in the description of the comment, of the description of the channel.
Perfect.
So yes. So I mean, Anja, you said you had a question for me. You want to ask me that question?
Oh, actually, I do. You're archiving, right? And your way of archiving is, I think, through the website, through the talks, things that are being saved on the World Wide Web. What exactly does archiving mean to you, and how do you think books are, or let's rephrase the question. What do books embody for you in the framework of archiving or in archives?
Okay, the way I see it is that literature is how civilizations are actually formed. Books are the way books are the way that people actually form the civilizations that we see, because you find the writer is the one who writes the experiences of people, and then that is what becomes the civilization that we are experiencing. So what I'm doing with my archiving with the literature is because I realized this, and I'm a passionate person about literature. So what I'm interested in is trying to make sure that everybody knows what's happening in the literary scene of the continent and the African diaspora, and the mindset is that I'm trying to build what's happening now, so that we are up to date with what we do, what we are all doing, but also the people who will come after us will actually know what's happening. Because one of the things I know is that it'll be a lie for us to imagine that we're the only people who are doing all these amazing events, amazing festivals, amazing books. It's a lie. There's no way that we were the first people to come up with these things. But the problem is, in the past, all these things would happen and then there'd be no record of them and they just vanish into the ether. So my plan is just to record what's happening now, so that we know what's happening and the people in the future will know. That's what I'm doing.
I love that. And that will sound like self-promotion. It really is not. But that's exactly why my first collection is called Soon the Future of Memory, because whatever is happening right now is going to be the future of someone else's memory, maybe even our own memory, right? Mm-hmm. So I love how you just explained it in a very concise way, because for me it's always like this absurd thing to explain, but you basically just like brought it to the point. Yeah, thank you so much. It's so interesting, like to just have something that outlives us and like a documentation. I think that's why it's so relevant, right? Also, Joey, like you act and you photograph, which is a complete language on its own. And I think it's just so relevant to not to shy away from books, not to shy away from documentation, because it doesn't only like write the future and the future memory, or normalize things. I mean, you say it builds civilizations, and for me, it will normalize certain things. If we don't tell them, nobody will tell them for us, right? So nobody will hold these stories for us, and they will not outlive us at the end of the day. So there was something I wanted to say that I just forgot, but like basically that's why I think it's so relevant, and it will also give permission to others to do the same, because everyone's truth matters at the end of the day, and whoever is going to read that in, I don't know, centuries from now, is going to look back and be like, oh, okay, I like this one, and I can relate to that, and oh, that's new to me. That was a weird time back then. That's so interesting to read about. And what did these people actually do? That's an interesting event. We don't have these kind of events today anymore. Basically, the way we look at our memory, at our ancestors and what they've done and created.
I actually want to mention something about for not just about the future. I mean, one of the things I've learned about what I do is, you see, we always assume that we always think about us as the creators of the work or the archive, and we always think about like I'm doing stuff about your book is coming out, but we always forget about the people who are just following us. So we're talking about the people who are now in high school, colleges, who are, and they also need to see that stuff is happening, because they're the ones who are going to be building the next, they'll be the ones building the next archive. So it's not just about the people who will be doing the work in 10 years or 15 years. We're doing stuff which, I mean, the stuff you're doing now, even you do, when the work is being seen by younger people right now, and they are going to build on it, and they're going to be much better than us. Because when you're pioneers, you're just starting. the people who follow us will be even better than us. So that's just my mindset. It's not just about maybe 10 or 15 or 30 years. It's about the next like the next group of people who are behind us.
Yeah.
Though if I want to get your work, because I know you're an exhibition, you have poet photography. We're now wrapping up. Where can I get your work? Where can I get your stuff?
Well, you can just contact me on my because I have a Facebook page where it's Nsoseme Dora, and I also have blog, a website, kind of, where you can also find my work. I will also tape that on the chat so that you have it. But I had for and yeah. I hope I'm pronouncing your name very well.
Yes, you are. No worries.
Okay. So how is it to publish a book in Germany there? Because I always feel like poets write, but they don't always go into the publishing also aspect of it. Most of the time, they just keep their poems, their writings themselves. So how is it to publish a book?
I did not hear the beginning of it. Did I get it right that did you ask how it is to publish in Germany, or did you ask to publish in Germany?
How is it? How is it?
So I asked, how is it to publish in Germany, and also I do because most of the poets, they don't really go into publishing. So are poets in Germany publishing a lot? How does it work there?
So what I've noticed and observed in the recent 2 to 3 years is that there's more small publishing houses, independent publishing houses by people of color, Black people, Indigenous people, because this has been something that's been completely missing, like completely missing. And they make sure to represent artists and poets, especially BPOC poets, more and more. It's not something that I see happening quite frequently or like knowingly or on a very big scale, to be honest. That's why I keep on like emphasizing like how important something like Witnessed is under Edition Assemblage, because it hasn't happened often. There is bigger publishing houses who now start to create smaller publishing houses, like sister publishing houses that focus on poetry. It's German speaking mostly, but at least it is going into a good direction because it is mostly still experimental, right? It's still new. It's still poets of color who do this in Germany, which is unfortunately still new for the literary scene here. But how it was interesting, to be honest. I just published it and was like, okay, let's see how the reactions are going to be. It was like a complete surprise, but I kept my expectations low and I was positively surprised. But yeah, it isn't necessarily easy to find somewhere to go and just publish your work, right? You wouldn't know who to address first to get your, especially English-speaking poetry published. And that is something that I actually hope to see develop within the next few years.
How would I get your book, Anja? Like, if I'm not in Germany, do you have is it on Amazon or something like that?
It is, but I hate to promote that. But yes, you can get it on the website you just mentioned. And you can get it off rootsofcompassion.com. I think they ship internationally, at least everyone who had interest in my book outside of Germany and outside of Europe. I sent them the link and it worked. People have ordered it to Egypt and Singapore, and it worked. They arrived. I made sure to check. Yeah, but you can reach these links via my website. So I linked everything, so it just gets a bit more of an overview of where to get it. Yeah.
AnjaSaleh.com.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so let's talk about AnjaSaleh.com and not other websites.
Exactly. When we refer to a website with A, that's what we mean. AnjaSaleh.com.
That's good. So I'm going to say thank you so much, ladies, for joining me today. I'm really excited. I've learned a lot from you about the scenes in your countries, and I'm hoping that whoever watches this in the future will be enriched by it. And thank you, Do and Anja. Please don't log off. But we'll end our broadcast here. Do you have anything? Any last word? Any last comment? Any Do, Anja?
Just thank you so much to Do for sharing. It was so nice to hear, and so nice also to have this conversation with the two of you. Thank you so much, James, for hosting and inviting us here. I really appreciate it.
Do?
Yeah. Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you, Anja, for sharing. Really updated, and I look forward to learn more about your work.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies, and thank you everybody out there on the interwebs.